Where I could add value is when it comes to any matchups that we might go with, giving the players or even the line coaches a bit of understanding of, when this particular player is at his best. In my experience, this is what potentially can take that away from him. So,
Episode 9 of The Talking Points. As we preview round 14, we've got the man who used to coach our opponents, Alan Richardson. Welcome, Richo.
Gibbo, good to be here.
Coming off a 28-point loss to the Bulldogs, how much do you talk about that game, and is it hard to put a finger on why everyone went flat on the same week?
Well, first part of the question, we do talk about that game for a couple of reasons. There's some things that we definitely needed to address, but there are also some similarities between the Bulldogs and the Saints in terms of the way they move the ball from the back, and that really challenged us last week. No greater example than kick-ins, and we've been really strong in terms of defending teams from the back to the front. So there's some real learnings there for us to take into this week. We had too many blokes that were down. Too many of our players that have been up for a while, weren't at the level they needed to be. So we don't need to spend a lot of time on that, but we certainly identified that and had some good, healthy conversations around that. And now I've forgotten the second part of your question, Gibbo. What was the next part?
I was talking about how everyone sort of looked to be flat on the same week. Is it a management thing? Is it just a vibe on the day?
It's a hard one. We've been playing some pretty good footy, really. We were going okay without getting a result against Brisbane, but the lead up to that game, the Port Adelaide game, was strong, and then we had a really flat one that day. We've now had, as everyone, we've been on the road. We've had, short breaks, really strong performance against Collingwood, to win that game by 10 goals, and you think you're starting to get the sort of momentum you need to really build. And we fell away last week. What it shows is if we're not at our best, and this is probably true of most teams, if we're not at our best, we're not going to beat good teams. That's where we're at the minute. We need to be playing with real energy. Our system requires that. We are a team that is not all about pressure, but pressure's important. We've got a fantastic defence that, again, played pretty well on the weekend. When you consider both Josh Bruce and Norton didn't score, they've been pretty important to them. Our big defenders are going really well. But we do need to get pressure on, and we couldn't get that on the weekend. So you're right, we're off a bit. We didn't spend too much time on the why, Gibbo. We identified internally that last time was a 4-day break leading into Port Adelaide. This was not. We thought that we just addressed what happened and that it's not us and it's not going to get it done and we need to do something about it. So the Saints is the next opportunity.
You mentioned the word learnings before. How do you take those learnings and actually communicate them with the players, get that message across during the week?
Well, meetings are much more difficult than they were pre-COVID, and so that's a bit of a challenge. But this was a group conversation with edits that were the way we want to play or the way we don't want to play. That's not us. That's not going to get it done. So it was a combination of that, and then we trained it. So if it was an intensity issue, then there was the right amount of intensity in a particular drill. If it was a physical issue, then there was the right amount of physicality. If it was a method issue, and there's a bit of both in all of that, then we got it done on the training track. So looked at it, all agreed that that's not us, all agreed that this is what we're going to do about it, then go and train it, and hopefully that'll transfer into the game on the weekend. In fact, not hopefully, it will.
Saints are flying at the moment. They're 8-5, came within 2 points of Brisbane. That scoreline may not have reflected the game completely. Brisbane probably could have put them away. How highly do you rate St Kilda this season?
Yes, well, as you could appreciate, I watched them pretty closely. Yeah. I would suggest closer than I do other clubs. But no, they're playing good footy. They've changed things a bit. Certainly, Rats has probably got them playing within a bit more of an attacking from the back style, and they did something about personnel with Jones and Butler and Hill. They've got some serious wheels, those lads, and so that's going to present some challenges. And look, they're in really good form. They had a downer, didn't they, against the Cats? I don't think Ryder played. I don't think Jones played. They've been pretty important to them, from a centre bounce, get territory perspective, and so they're both important players. But no, they're in good shape. There's no doubt about that. We'll have to be our best to be in the game to give us a chance to win it.
Obviously, you coached them last year. What insight can you offer to the Ds now that you're internal, like in the meetings and the lead up to this game?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, they've changed a little bit of the way they play. The defence is not too dissimilar. Stoppage has changed. It was always Steele that was the tagger, and he's been given his head a bit. Seb Ross is doing it a bit more now. They've got a little bit more speed on the outside, which is I think that's pretty obvious for all to see. So that's a bit different. Where I could add value is when it comes to any matchups that we might go with, giving the players or even the line coaches a bit of understanding of, when this particular player is at his best, this is what it looks like. In my experience, this is what potentially can take that away from them. So, yeah, hopefully there's some value there.
Ross went to Neil last week. I think he stopped him from getting a clearance for the first time in 5 years. Yep. Do you expect him to go after one of our midfielders, potentially, a Clayton Oliver or Christian Petrarca, or do you think it'll be more of a head-to-head in there?
Look, I don't really know. Generally, certainly last year, but this year too, they generally identified a midfielder. In my time, it was always Clayton that we went after pretty strongly, but we've got some blokes in pretty good form in that space. Christian, obviously, Vines is going really well. Brayshaw's recent form is also, pretty strong. So, that's the strength of our team. It fell away a little bit. We had a couple that were probably below their best in that group last week, so we're looking for a response. But generally, it seems, with the exception of Neil last week, they've tended to back in their own system, their own mids, and then if things get out of control, not unlike we do, they'll look to get someone to perhaps play a role.
Individual records against teams are an interesting one. We've won 3 of our last 20 against St Kilda. When you were at the Saints, is that something you talk about at all, or is it just a number?
It is just a number. No, there was 2 footy clubs that were on similar path really. Ruzi and I got appointed at the same time. It was both sort of the rebuild. The Saints, it was the end of, Goddard and Del Santo had moved on, and Rewalt and Dempster and Montagna were coming to the end. So it was a bit of a changing of the guard from a players' personnel. Demons was pretty similar, really. Slightly different paths in terms of the type of players they went after, but both invested heavily in the draft. So it was 2 young groups that were coming through that probably weren't as consistent as they'd want to be, and I think that's building with both groups. Clearly, Melbourne were able to go to a pretty high level. I should got to say we now, don't I? Obviously, in 2018, and we're hoping to get back there soon. The Saints look like they're starting to become much more consistent. So it's hard to know. Sometimes you match up well. Your strengths match up well against their strengths. You're able to control certain things, but it doesn't. It stands for nothing. On Saturday night, we're looking forward to it.
We're off to Alice Springs. I'm guessing you've never been to Traeger Park, but we're actually flying over with the Saints. Internally, have we spoken at all about that ground? We've played a bit there over the last few years. Are they confident, the boys, going into the battle there?
Yeah, actually, I have been there before. Was with the Saints a few years ago, so I know a little bit about the ground. But Melbourne have played there much more. And Goody's, he likes the ground. He thinks it suits our group. We've certainly played some good footy there in the past. I think our last time there should have got the job done. It was a bit of the story of our year, wasn't it, I reckon? I think it was last year.
Against West Coast.
Against West Coast, yeah. So, no, I don't think the ground or the venue will hold any fears. In fact, I think our group, just from the vibe of the meetings and the conversations around the venue, have been really positive. So there's no fears.
We're coming up to a really important block in the fixture, 4 games, about 15 days. Attacking that, are you expecting to bring a fair few players into the side? Obviously, you're going to need fresh legs for a lot of those games. Well,
that's certainly what we've said to the guys that don't get picked this week. We'll have selection tonight. But, that's been the message, that it's a squad mentality that we proved in the last block where it was crammed that we did need to rotate the team a bit. And we probably did that more than we thought we were going to do. We from a planning perspective prior to it was, look, if they seem like they've still got the energy, we want to get synergy, we want to get connection, so we'll try and keep the team together. But we did need to change the team, and I think that'll happen again. I think that we'll we'll need to get some new boys into the team, and probably even this week. Without going, as I said, we've got selection yet to come, but I think there'll be some changes to the team this week to make sure that we get some run and get some energy back into the team. What is really positive for us and for the fans back home, and they don't get to see results because they're not these VFL games we're playing aren't proper fixtures. So there's no results get printed in the paper, who's going well, who's not. There's none of that. But our boys are in really good shape. They played the Saints last Sunday and won the game pretty comfortably, playing really good footy. Some guys that we're really confident could come in and execute their role. Some will get a chance as early as this week. Some will get a chance in the coming weeks.
Those next couple of games really define our season. We either go strongly, pinch a spot in the 8, or miss out and go home, which would feel like a bit of a waste. Does it get spoken about at all at the moment, that the fact that finals are so close and these next 15 days are do or die essentially?
You're certainly, probably more so from Max and Jack, from a leader's perspective. From a coach's perspective, particularly when you have a game like last week, when there's things you've got to address and your focus is much more on the process. We're not going to win unless we get this right. That's Goody's language to the players is we're going to get what we deserve, and we didn't deserve victory because we had too many passengers and we were inconsistent with the way that we want to play. So that's really our focus. We don't want them lifting their eyes too much. That stuff will look after itself. We really do want to focus on the Saints and then the next opponent and the next opponent, but with an understanding that they're important games.
Well, hopefully we get the ball rolling against the Saints on Saturday. Richo, thanks for your time on the Talking Points.
On you, Gibbo. Thanks, mate.